Give me a thumbs up. Live. All right, welcome to the June 26th Recreation Committee meeting. I'll call the meeting to order, and let's jump right in. First thing we have is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Those went out today. I don't know if anyone had any questions or comments, or if everyone got a chance to look them over. There is a copy here as well.
I wrote them, so I don't have any questions.
They look great. Any discussion on the minutes?
I have no discussion. They look fine to me.
All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from the last meeting of 5/22/24.
And someone second? I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
And one thing I did want to mention on the minutes real quick, I was talking to the town clerk, and there are some minutes from a meeting last year that we need to approve. That was when the committee was kind of in transition, so I'm going to write those, and then I'll bring them to the next meeting.
Okay.
She also said that we can approve them even though some of the members weren't on the committee at the time, so we'll just address that at the next meeting.
Is that one of the ones where we needed to review? Do we have to like review the actual like?
If you can, that would be great. I'll send it out well in advance of the next meeting if
Okay.
you want to, but I think as long as we're able to approve them, we just need them for
Okay.
paperwork reasons.
Got it.
All right, that's done. Second item on the agenda is Recreation Committee restructuring. So a few weeks ago, the town administrator and I think we discussed this at our last meeting too, went to the Board of Selectmen and we changed we got it approved to change the size of the Recreation Committee from 7 to 5. We've had some quorum issues and some issues getting members, so that just allows us to continue to meet and move forward. We are full now because we do have 5 members, and everybody submitted to be reappointed, and I think that was handled at their meeting earlier this week. So I just wanted to give an update on that and let everybody know that that would be the case going forward. That could change at some point in the future, but I think it's important that we are able to meet and have quorum and be able to, make progress on the different things we're working on. Any question?
Quorum now is 3.
Quorum now is 3, which does mean in certain circumstances, if we're going to go to another committee's meeting or another board's meeting, we just have to be aware of that, right? Reorganization of the committee. So because the appointments were done earlier this week, I thought it would make sense to do our kind of reorganization, appoint the chair, appoint the vice chair, secretary. We don't have to change anything if we don't want to, effective for our next meeting, but I thought we could handle it today, just so that it was done and it was ready. Is everyone in agreement with that?
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Any questions on that? So we need, as always, we need a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary.
So I'll nominate Steve Baker as chair.
I
Second.
that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I will nominate Patrick Molina as vice chair.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And secretary. I will nominate Amanda Benecker as secretary.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
that part's done. We also need to make sure that we have 2 members from the committee appointed to the Community Preservation Committee.
One,
Oh, we're going to do 1 now?
yes,
Okay.
according to the town clerk.
Okay.
Because there's only 5 of us.
Because there's only
I
5
see.
of us. Okay. Any discussion on that?
In that sense, it's just to go to the meetings, me essentially a liaison for the committee to see what's going on with the.
Yeah, I
the
think
CPC.
to make recommendations and to be part of that process.
I'm happy to volunteer to do that if no one else wants to.
Do we second that?
Would someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, someone will have to move it, right?
Or-
I'll make a motion to Patrick for the CPC committee.
I second that motion.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Excellent. Next on the agenda is a letter from the Community Preservation Chair, who's also here with us tonight, that kind of went through some things that we discussed at our last meeting, and I think it kind of laid out some things that we had questions about. So I think it was really, Mike, definitely appreciate you sending this over. I think it was helpful kind of to lay it out, and certainly we can discuss that as we move forward. But I did want to make sure that everybody had a copy of that. I know I sent it out with the meeting agenda, and then there's a copy in the packet that I handed out as well. So it just goes through, the CPC process, kind of what they do once a project is, approved at town meeting, as well as some of the roles and responsibilities, as well as how the Recreation Committee can be involved in that. So I wanted to put that on the agenda prior to the discussion that we're going to have tonight, just, again, to make sure everyone was aware of it, everyone had a chance to review it. If there's any questions on that, we can certainly discuss it. I don't know if anyone has any immediate questions.
Maybe the best way to handle it would be to have Mike kind of do his spiel. I think he was prepared to talk to us a bit.
Yes?
That's probably the best way to get this kicked off.
So, Mike, appreciate you coming in tonight. I think it's great that we can kind of have a discussion, kind of figure out. I know the Recreation Committee is really interested in, being involved and helping
Sure.
out. So we want to collaborate with you and, figure out how we can help and what we can do to work together. So the floor
Yes.
is yours.
So thank you for inviting me tonight. So I am Mike Dempsey. I am the chairman of the Conservation Commission, and also I am the Conservation Commission representative to the Community Preservation Committee, and also currently serving as the chair of the CPC. So I tried to put together, a few of the questions, and I'll just quickly run through some of this and give a little more detail on a few items. But as you saw, the way that the Community Preservation Committee works is we see it as our primary role is to collect proposals, needs, requests for CPA funds, and CPA funds are for recreation, for historic preservation, open space, and affordable or community housing. So, we have like a yearly process that we go through, trying to get ideas from the community, and then putting out a request for proposals, taking the proposals, making sure that they fit the criteria, and then taking a vote on, and we also hear from the proponents of the proposal, and then we take a vote to recommend them to town meeting. That's our biggest role, and once it's gone through that process, other than perhaps, going to town meeting and explaining things or answering questions, that's kind of where our role ends. Occasionally, sometimes we may be asked for an opinion on a scope change, if does something fit in? Because a lot of the times the projects come in, they may have been written in September or October of a year, and then it's almost a year later, once they're approved, and then start to get worked on, and, and then things change,
Sure.
So we may be asked that, or we may be asked about, can money be spent on this thing instead of this thing? So sometimes we have to make those kind of decisions. But we do not typically get involved in managing the project. We try to keep up to date on what's going on, but again, that's not our primary role. We may bring that up at a meeting just to keep our members informed. So, on the CPC, we have, there's supposed to be 9 members, but since the Affordable Housing Committee doesn't exist anymore, that position hasn't been filled. And the Open Space and Trails Committee was another one that kind of folded into your group. And so Rebecca thought, gee, you guys should have 2 reps, one for the open space and trails, the other for recreation. But as I say, the town clerk says we have to change the bylaw before we can do that. So we'll have to be in the process to get that done.
Is that something that you're planning to do, or is that something that we should?
No, we'll get it done.
Okay.
I mean, it's really a minor thing. Unfortunately, it can't be done until town meeting, whenever
sure.
that is, so it may not happen for another year. So that's pretty much what the CPC does. So what I wanted to talk about, though, is project management. What happens after town meeting approves something?
Sure.
Where does it go from there? So during the past 15 or so years, previous to about 2 years ago, the CPC kind of functioned on its own with a little bit of help from the finance director. Pretty much that was it. We didn't have a community preservation administrator, even though we could have. We didn't have a town manager or administrator, so we had to get our help when we needed it from the finance director. But the finance director, that was not really in their job, so occasionally they would help us, but they primarily were focused on financial management of CPA. And so what the previous finance director always did was keep track of spending for the projects, pretty much. That was the biggest role that she took. So a lot of times we wanted to have help. So, if someone brought a project forward, we kind of relied on them to manage it if that was necessary. So, I'll give an example of like conservation. Since we put a lot of projects in, we had, say, a project for paving the road into VZ Park. And so we kind of managed that project. It was really easy because the highway department was willing to get the vendor to do it, and so we didn't have to do too much. But nobody had any input to it except the commission and the highway department.
Gotcha.
But a lot of times, things didn't always turn out the way that we might have expected. What kind of effects did that have? One effect was some projects might take a longer time than others. I can think of one that's still open. We voted, actually voted twice to have a museum kind of structure for the Vito hand tub out there. And I think that first came up in maybe 2015, and it still hasn't been done. I mean, partly done, but not complete. Why? Well, because the people who were supposed to be managing it, they didn't really have any idea what to do. The finance director at the time helped out with a couple of things that were done, but it doesn't really work sometimes to have volunteers managing projects. So now that we have a town administrator, I think I'm really looking forward to the town manager, really administrator, working to manage all the projects. And so we started a couple years ago where Rebecca came up with a bunch of procedures and forms that we're using for projects. So now when a project gets initiated, the first thing usually done is that Rebecca will meet with whoever brought the project forward and have some forms signed, there's a procedure for closing out the project, what happens then, and a couple other simple things that have been instituted. But the biggest thing is that, as I say, hopefully we're going to transition, and it's going to probably take a couple of years, transition so that she is, or whoever is filling that position, is the primary person managing the projects. So that, again, it speeds things up and, eliminates some of the things of, unknown kind of thing. What do we do now, kind of happen. So that's proceeding. So I have to tell you that even though we started to make that change, what didn't happen was the warrant articles, which I usually put together, go to town meeting, didn't get changed.
Sure.
It's like using copy and paste is an easy thing to do, but you didn't realize that you said the same thing, wrong thing, So typically, all of the projects have said managed by the town administrator and someone else.
Right.
So that's why, and usually that's either someone who put the project together or a committee whose category it falls in. So all of the Pines-related projects over the last couple of years have said, you guys manage it, even though you may not have known anything about them.
Right.
Right, and I think that was a concern that came up at our last
Right?
meeting.
And, so even though they were, primarily that was said because they were the recreation category.
Sure, gotcha.
And the historic ones sometimes end up the same way. Even though the Historic Commission may not even know, but they're a historic project, preservation project, so they get named as the guilty party in the case.
Well, wouldn't that be helpful, though? I mean, it seems like a lot of this new idea is to put a lot of pressure on Rebecca or whoever the town administrator is to, oversee, manage, make sure everything comes in on time and on budget, all that sort of stuff. It's a lot of roles for one person. And so, doesn't it maybe make sense to have, for recreation projects, the recreation committee to be involved at least in sort of some of the oversight, or make recommendations about some of the handling of these projects from, the inception to completion?
Yes, well,
Not to say that our town administrator is not extremely
No.
capable and all those sort of things, which she's doing an amazing job, and that's not a
So-
fluff comment.
two things on that.
Yeah.
One is, what is actual project management? What is it?
Right,
What does it entail? So really, once a project has been proposed and then is approved, what do we have? Okay, we have a scope, presumably that what is the project, what is the end result of the project. And we have one single estimate of what the project is going to cost, and kind of depending upon the size of the project, how, what are some of the steps and how is it going to be done.
And as I understand it, the one estimate is always a high shot because the grant is for that much money and no more. And so when we make those estimates, we always try to shoot high to make sure that we don't overdo those, right?
Yes. I mean, we don't,
We can't get final bids until it's approved at town meeting.
yes, I mean, we don't specifically, it's like, say you're going to put a project together, all you are charged with doing is getting one quote, or one estimate, really, it's an estimate on how much that and if it seems reasonable, hey, we go with that. And if you think that you can get the project done, then, in the committee, the CPC does look at that. In a case of.
And is that in conjunction with the finance folks?
Well, remember that there's all these
So
representatives.
they're there
on-
to basically speak for that
Yes.
piece of the project. I got it. Okay.
Exactly.
Sure.
So, there was, just this year, the town clerk brought a proposal in for scanning documents.
Right.
And, I personally have some experience with a project like that in the past, plus my background was in IT. So I said, look, I think you need a little more money on this. So we bumped up the ask to maybe another $3,000 or $4,000.
Sure.
So that kind of thing sometimes happens. But, so you've got this estimate, but the bigger the project, sometimes you don't really know where it's going to go. You don't know if you hope that you're going to be able to get it done, but the bigger the project, the more room there is for, issues to come up. And so oftentimes, that has to be taken care of. But primarily, the management process involves, things like, I put it in here, but things like approving purchases, tracking the finances, meeting the state's 30B purchasing requirements for estimates and bids. Just doing the bid process is really difficult, And then, issuing contracts, getting help on technical issues, maybe identifying different vendors if necessary. And, like I say, especially in the larger projects. When I say larger projects, I would say maybe anything over $50,000 to $75,000, And we have, this year, we had
Several,
quite a
right.
few large projects to do.
So can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Just thinking, because all of that stuff that you just went through around kind of the contracting, procurement, logistics, and even I think some of the scheduling logistics of it, I 100% think, the town administrator is the right person to be handling that. But in terms of and I'm thinking of it from the actual project logistics itself, right? So from the point of view of I'll use the splash pad as an example. That project was approved, I think, 2 years ago at town meeting, and I know there's some logistics issues that are being worked through on that. What is that, who's responsible for that part of the process? I understand, someone comes to the CPC, or the CPC has a project that they want to put forward, and we say, okay, this is the amount of money that we want to put into it. But when it's kind of in that pre-town meeting phase where it's thinking about the project logistics, is it going to fit where we want it to go? Do we have the right infrastructure in place to support it? Question one is that something that we should be involved in, or can we be involved in? Just talking through that part of it. And then I think the more important part to me is when we're going to sign off and say this project is complete, when the town is going to sign off and say, hey, this project is complete, who's ultimately responsible for that decision, and should, again, I'll use the splash pad at the Pines as an example. When that project is complete, should we be looking at it and saying, okay, yep, this is how we expected it to be, everything's the way that we want it to be, before we say, yep, this project is complete? And I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yes. Well, I think that your committee, and really all of the other committees that are representative, have a role in a lot of this stuff that doesn't always get done. And especially, I think, on the front end, when we're first getting, as I say, someone may come in with a rec project that you know nothing about. You don't know anything about that they want to do this, And so it's very important, I think, that your representative weighs in as much as they can, and then also goes back to your board and says, oh, here's a couple of CPA projects that are being proposed. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Maybe, come back. So, what are the 4 roles, I would say, that any committee, but certainly your committee, can do? And that is to, first of all, bring needs and ideas to the CPC. So that first step, when we're looking for projects or thinking about different ideas, right? So that happens, you know, a lot, like conservation, we do that a lot.
Yep.
Historic, you know, Claire Walsh is always coming up with different ideas, you know. The next thing that you can do is actually submit a proposal. Maybe your committee has talked about doing something, you know, over the past year. You say, gee, it'd be really great to have X, Y, Z at the Pines or whatever. So you can put together, write the proposal. You can be the actual proponents of the proposal. And then the next thing is to comment while we're reviewing, while the CPC is reviewing any CPA proposals. That's the critical period, which I think you're really referring to, Steve, and that is when we're looking at this thing.
How do we
want-
decide what goes forward and what doesn't?
And what questions do we
Well,
have?
because
Yeah.
you may say, look, you know, it's a great idea to have X, Y, Z at the Pines, but we don't think there's anywhere it can go. We're full there. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You know, because again, what do the other CPC members know about some of the areas? And it's the same thing like, you know, conservation or open space or something. Somebody who's the historic rep or the selectman rep or the finance board rep, they don't know you know, it's like, so it's very critical that the person who's on your board that's on the CPC comes back and lets you know about it so you can comment on these things. And then the last thing is to get, once the project is approved, I think it's very important that you get updates so that you know, you can answer questions, even though you're not doing the project, but you can answer, because who's going to ask about a splash pad? They're going to say, Steve, aren't you on the rec committee? What's going on?
I think Amanda and I are both, you know, pretty regularly fielding questions about all of the open
Yeah.
all of the open projects related to recreation. You know, I had a conversation with somebody last week about the pickleball courts. I know there was a conversation about the splash pad. So I think that's something that we're very eager to get.
Yeah.
And, you know, definitely want to have those updates. You know, I have, later in our agenda, I have an entire list of things that, you know, to be honest with you tonight, I don't have a lot of updates on. But I know between now and our next meeting, I'll probably get questions on all, if not most of those, and I'm sure other folks are the same way. So definitely, that's something that we want to make sure that we're aware of, not necessarily down to the immediate, like, oh, they're, you know, starting paving tomorrow, but
Yeah.
more just general timelines, because we get asked about it a lot.
Sure, sure.
So
Well,
that's good.
What I would suggest is, you know, we've got this new page on there that's got all the updates. It's got all, besides having the updates, it has all the documentation on the project that you can look at. You know, if somebody says, gee whiz, I didn't know the splash pad was going to include this or that or something, you can look at the proposal and see exactly what the scope of the project was in order to answer somebody's questions. And then, you know, what's going on? Why isn't it built? We are trying, between Rebecca and now Annie, who's going to be working very closely as her assistant, I expect there's going to be a lot more information than we've ever had before about updates and everything. And again, primarily for your benefit to be able to answer questions, because it seems like, you know, a lot of people on Facebook, they don't bother to go to the town website. They just ask the question, you know what I mean, and expect somebody to give them an answer. So, you know, I think so that resource will be good. But ultimately, sometimes you may need to, I would recommend, you know, sending an email to Annie will be the kind of point person, say, why is the splash pad laid, or something like that. Maybe you can't figure that out. What is the ultimate reason?
Right.
And then she can answer it for you. So
Yeah,
that
and we've
we're all talking on the same stuff, because
Right.
if we got one committee saying something that's different, it's not good.
Right.
Yeah, and what we've been trying to do is prior to our meetings, get an update on those, and then, I don't want to say run interference, but rather than, every time someone asks a question, say, oh, go talk to Annie or the town administrator, we try to field those as well, just because, we should know what's going on, and we should be able to answer people's questions.
And one of the biggest problems in town right now is that a lot of times people don't have access to the information, or don't
know where to
look,
find it.
don't look at it in a particular way. Like, getting the information out seems to be a common theme of,
Yep.
town problem right now. And so one method is the website, but another method is, the crier. For lack of a better, thing. But no, I mean, and how people get their information is different.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
like, for the town to be able to, in a lot of different facets, get people's questions answered and, have people feeling good about the projects that are going on in town and that, like, things aren't just stagnating for no reason.
And it might, something we might be able to do as a committee, and again, we can only speak to recreation and I guess open space related projects, but maybe we can provide some sort of quarterly update that could be published on the town website or something like that, help put that together, especially if we're, engaged as part of the CPC committee, and
Yep.
also, we're meeting more regularly now, so I think there's an opportunity there for us to,
Sure.
put something out. Maybe we can work with the town administrator to put it in her newsletter or put it up on the town website, just so, I think it's great that the project updates are gonna be on the CPC page. But inevitably, people, may not go there and look at it, so the more we can get it out in front of them.
Right.
Just so, I think the biggest thing people want to see, and what I keep hearing, is they just want to understand what's going on. But your point is valid, that they don't always go and look for the information either.
Sure.
I think the other piece to that too is, for myself as well as probably lots of other community members, we don't maybe necessarily know the process of things, right? So when you have someone say, you have this project that got approved a year ago, why isn't it done? A lot of times, smarts would say, common sense would say, it's a big project, there's a lot of moving parts, all these sort of things. But sometimes, like I said, even for myself, like I really appreciate how you have broken down kind of just the process of how those things kind of go, even in the beginning, not even including the actual project, because there's so much that goes into it. And I think sometimes, as a member of a community, we're like, oh, we're getting a splash pad, this sounds great, oh, but it approved a year ago, and when is it going to be done? And it's hard to, I think, in the upfront, I wasn't part of the committee then, so I don't know what was said when it was approved, like, okay, we're going to have this done in 5 years or whatever, I don't know. But I think that's part of it too, is that there's just a misunderstanding too of like timelines in terms of like, yeah, this was approved, but it's because there is a lot of stuff that there's steps you have to take and there's things you have to do. So even if the splash pad, there weren't any issues with it, I still feel like we're still at about the same timeline, because that's just kind of how these things happen. And so, just educating, I think, the community in a gentle way as well. It's just saying, like, absolutely, it's on our radar, we're working on it, this is what we're doing.
Yes.
Might help, I don't know.
I mean.
Right. It's like setting the expectation. And so when the expectation doesn't land, being able to, as town members say, hey, listen, things change and this is what happened, and now here's the new expectation. At least that way people, again, it's
actually-
so people don't think that, people are stuck in the sand.
Right, it actually brings up something that I hadn't thought of, and I, Mike, I'm sure you can answer this, but you mentioned kind of the comment period for the projects, right, where there's that opportunity. Is that publicized, or like, what is the process for that, timeline for that? And I'll be honest, I've typically, and this is on me, right, because not having done my research in certain cases, I've typically heard about the projects shortly before the warrant gets published,
right.
right? And but that's late in the process, when you've already gone through the CPC's already done a ton of work. How is that information put out to the public to say, hey, we've got these proposals, and
Come on in and
you could come and comment, or send us an email, we want your feedback? Like, what is that process, and how do we get the word out about that? And again, I'm speaking specifically to recreation projects and open space, but I think it's important for all of them.
Yes. My answer is not good enough. And
lot of-
again,
A lot of it falls to the people that present the project.
Yeah.
Like, for example, when the skate park wanted to put together a project and present it, they went and reached out to the public for public sessions.
Yep, the design sessions and things like
Right,
that.
to get ideas, to get feedback, to get support. And those letters of support go to the CPC along with the project to demonstrate that there's a need for it and that there's support for it. And unfortunately, a lot of times you don't get design until you get money to get a real design. Well, so it starts, once you get the approval at the town meeting, that's when everything starts. And so you gotta go through a design period. That design period's gonna seek out and go through more public comment, public information. Then it's gonna go to an engineer and get designed out. And all of that takes a tremendous amount of time. I know this because of the dog park. And that was only $25,000 project from the CPC. Everything else was a private grant. And when I went through that process, I got the support, we started talking about it. As soon as we got it approved and we started going into the real design, it was 2 years from that point before we got a completed design with the public comments, the engineers, and then it was another 2 years for it to get built.
Right.
And that's just the time, and the dog park didn't have a whole lot to it because it's just a plot of land that no real preparation had to be done.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's ways for us to get, if there's creative ways that we could get some of the information out about proposed projects before they, like,
Yes.
you know, do we host some sort of, you know, CPC, like joint CPC recreation open house where the project owners are here and people can come and talk to them? Do we work with the cable department to do, you know, a 2-minute profile on a project and have it running on Groveland TV?
You post it on the crier. That's how you get it out there.
But the reality of that, though, is I think getting the information out there is good, but I think that what I think is valuable is the constructive feedback versus, you know, a lot of people saying, well, I think that sometimes some of the social media stuff has a tendency to go in a negative direction, right? So I think if there's ways to get, you know, constructive feedback that could be used to, you know, make sure that we're covering costs within a project or, you know, potentially raise an issue that we may not be thinking of, right? I know, like, when the splash pad was proposed, and I keep going back to that one just because it's on our agenda, but I know there were some questions about, you know, interfering with some other activities going on at the Pines and stuff like that, that somebody brought up at the time. I think getting that information out early, right, soliciting that information because people know about the projects in a constructive manner would be useful, but I just don't know what the best way to do it is.
Well, and even, you know, more basic than that, like, okay, is the splash pad a this year project or is it a 2028 project? You know, like, and so people, you know, again, I think it's about setting expectations. People will be upset if they think something's happening now and it's not. And, you know, Jason's point's 100%, you know, it's exactly on point. You know, you've got to do a whole bunch of stuff to even get a small thing done because it has to go through these various steps,
Right,
which
right.
are all helpful and ultimately make a better thing, whatever that thing is.
Well, yeah.
But if people think that, well, it was granted at the warrant, why isn't the parking at Shanahan why don't I see pavers at Shanahan Park right now, right? You know, like, so, you know, again, I think the first piece is everybody on these various boards and committees getting together and being like, okay, what's the real timeline look like? Is this a 5-year project? Is this a 2-year project? Is this, you know, something more intense?
Yep.
And then that, even just those basic things, it costs about this much, it's, you know, like, this is where it is right now, and that, you know, those high level things. And that'll let people know, like, oh, okay, well, then I guess it isn't behind that it's, the splash pad's not done yet this summer, you know,
Right.
say.
Well, and I think part of that, and I was going to ask about this too, is, you know, because it's come up on a number of occasions, is, you know, when we do a CPC project and then afterwards there needs to be a fee associated with use of that particular thing. Is that ever talked about as part of the proposal, or is that something that comes up later? And if not, should it be, you know, so, and again, I'm thinking specifically
It
about.
depends, you know, it depends. A lot of times it comes up not to CPC, it's after the fact, you know, because CPC doesn't, so many of the projects require ongoing maintenance, and you can't use CPA funds for maintenance. So the town has to figure out how you're going to maintain this, and then, that will come up sometimes. Should we charge a fee? We can't not allow non-residents to use anything that's funded with CPA funds.
Yep.
So some towns, charge a different rate for residents and non-residents. So,
Yeah, and that may be
that's
something
out
for
there.
us too, right? Like as a
Yeah.
committee, if, as we get more involved in the process and start to think about, projects are coming, it's a it's
Yeah.
something at the Pines, part of our discussion should probably be, hey, what do we think this is gonna cost? Just so we can be aware that, hey, there might be a fee associated with this in the future. And then just make that part of our feedback to CPC. I know you can't have it be part of the CPC project, but maybe there's, again, as we're trying to get more information out about stuff, maybe that's just something that should be
Yeah, well.
available for people.
See, and that's part of why your representative needs to be there and
Right.
saying this kind of stuff, to
Yep.
say, to know that, hey, we know our committee ultimately is going to be kind of overseeing all these things at the Pines. How are we going to do that? We may need to have eventually a Parks and Recreation Department for all this crazy stuff, But I just want to quickly say, I am very concerned about Community Preservation Act funds in Groveland. I think they are an invaluable tool that we have been able to use for almost 20 years to get all kinds of things done that we never, ever would have done without it. And, as you know, this spring, there was a move afoot to get rid of it. And fortunately, that was defeated. But that doesn't mean that next year they won't come back again and try to change it or get rid of it. And so I want to make sure that we inform the public as much as possible, because I do believe that the majority of people in Groveland support CPA, support the projects that have been done, and are all for it. But that doesn't mean that, we can just blindly say, hey, we don't care, we're going to do it any way we want. So, the update process, I think maybe making the project proposals on the web available while we're reviewing them is important, because normally those don't go out. You might not know about a project till right before town meeting,
You might also want to highlight when we're doing that, how much of the, some sort of estimate of how much of this is the matching funds, right? So you get your first business job and everybody tells you you're an idiot if you don't take the company match, right? This is that, right? In concept anyway.
Yeah.
And so in a situation where everybody's pretty budget conscious, turning down free money seems foolish, especially when CPA isn't just for fluff projects. I mean, the Shanahan parking, is a legit huge safety issue.
Right.
It's going to be a tremendous benefit to the area. You're going to be able to do a lot more at Shanahan than you were, before it was done. And so it's not just like a fluff project. And I think a lot of people have, they hear community preservation and they think, well, we don't need that. We need, substantive things. And these funds go towards substantive things.
Right, and I think the other thing that I would add to that is in my experience, the one thing that makes people see the value in something is seeing the results, and that's why I'm so focused on, as we're moving through these projects, right, making sure people understand, one, it was done with CPC funds, two, here's how we got from the proposal to the finished product, and here's, now you can make use of that or receive the benefits of it. I think that's what really gets people excited about
And also, this is how much of it was funded with state money.
Yep. Yeah, oh, yeah.
Like, then people will say, okay, well, we didn't have to come out of pocket, 80% for this project or whatever,
Right.
Right.
those kinds of things. I think those things will, win over hearts and minds.
Oh, yeah. So, as I said before, I'm really excited about the new position that Rebecca has created, because, here it is, 18 years or so since we originally voted for CPA. Finally now, we have regular employees who are going to be, managing the whole big process of things. It's not going to be just on volunteers. I mean, I think, as I said before, volunteers, have done a good job, but, certain things about publicity, so many things, signs at projects, things they just haven't got done because the volunteers just haven't had a chance to do them or didn't think of it or whatever. So,
Well, maybe there wasn't someone to really coordinate the effort.
yeah,
They
so
just don't know how.
Right.
I'm expecting.
I think there's plenty of volunteers in town. I think people, if you task them, will do.
Yeah.
Well,
The garden
Bagnell
the garden
is
at
a great
Bagnell is a
example.
perfect example.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a great example.
Yep.
It's not going to cost the town very much at all to get that up and running and nice, because there's a lot of people that are willing to, donate time, effort, materials,
Right.
So with this extra layer of organization, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to really doing a better job of, promoting CPA in our town and fighting any ideas to get rid of it, and also doing a better job of completing projects,
Right.
Yeah, and that's, and again, I think we're all excited to help with that however
Yeah.
we can, so.
For sure.
This is great. Any other questions on that particular item? Awesome. So let's talk about conservation a little bit. 'Cause
Yes.
one of the things, I think you and I spoke in passing about the fact that, open space was rolled into rec committee, and I know there's things that open space was doing outside of just the community trail, that recreation really hasn't done over the past probably 2 years, I would say. With the committees were merged, and then there was a lot of change. So I would welcome your thoughts and feedback on, things that we should be doing there, things that need to be done there, and then we'll figure out how we're going to do them.
Yes. So, there was this Groveland Open Space and Trails Committee. It's kind of started out as a subcommittee of the commission, and then it was a regular town committee, ongoing town committee. And conservation was very actively involved with it. We always had one or two of the commissioners go to the meetings and kind of work together because so much of it was about conservation issues. Unfortunately, it was hard to keep it full, kind of like what you experienced. For some reason, certain things are just difficult to get people to get on the committees, and that was the case. It had its ups and downs, depending upon who was the chairman, how much they could convince other people to come to the meetings.
Jason is our sole survivor from the Open Space Committee, right, Jason?
Yeah. I can tell you about open space and trails as far as conservation property. So conservation has 40 properties under our care, custody, and control, which amount to about 360 acres. Of those 40, 4 of them are large properties that, take most of our attention and time. VZ Park, Meadow Pond Reservation, Town Forest Reservation, and Center Street Greenway. Those 4 are really where most of our time and energy is spent when it comes to open space and trails. The other 36, are small properties. They may be, a couple of acres in a neighborhood, or they may be, 10 acres, but they're totally covered with wetlands, and then you're not going to really have a trail there. We try to do, I would say, I know where most of our efforts are at VZ Park, because it also has the buildings on it, and, we have 3 people that work for us there, and it's a big effort. But we have a stewardship group that works on Meadow Pond Reservation. That's worked out pretty good. Town Forest, there's a group up at Nichols Village that kind of manages the trails there. And the place that really doesn't have much attention right now is the Center Street Greenway. That's not the parcel in front that the town has control of. It's the parcels in the rear, the former Angelini and Mattingly properties. They total about, I don't know, let's see, it's maybe about 70 acres back there. And there are trails back there, but we did a lot of work with the Bagnell fourth graders when there was a teacher there who was like really into this, having the kids go out there. Because of her efforts, really did a great job at Town Forest with the trails there and Meadow Pond with the trails there. Really did a fantastic job. She used to get the parents out there every year to do cleanup and fix the trails and everything else, and it really helped out. But she retired, and since then, it's kind of, Bagnell's effort have kind of faded away, just because, they got other ideas and things to do, So we need help, because the commission, our job, besides our open space efforts and everything else, our primary job is to, be in charge of the Wetlands Protection Act, and we spend 90% of our time is spent at meetings approving projects, so that's mostly what we get done. We try to have cleanup days at some of our properties. Like I say, we try to get stewardship, where we've got two or three volunteers who are kind of keeping the trails clean and clear every year.
Is there a universal place where you go to post the, hey, we need volunteers?
No.
Maybe that's something, because, for example, I'm watching the garden, and I saw, the proponent of the project sending out flyers, and, every time you go to Bagnell, you get a flyer for the next time they're going to do a thing. But having some sort of one place, hey, volunteers this committee is looking for volunteers, or this commission, maybe
Well,
something on the
yeah,
website.
The point that was made earlier, right? There's tons of people that I think would be happy to help.
They just don't know.
We have, and we've talked about this before, about getting information out there, right? And we still need to do a brainstorming session on that, but I think if we say like, hey, we're gonna do, we need help doing trail cleanup, right?
Yeah.
And we're gonna do it, 3 weekends in May or something.
Yeah.
We would probably, with the right amount of kind of marketing of it and getting the word out, I think we would have more than enough people to help.
Right.
So that's something we should definitely, we need to probably prioritize. It sounds like the Center Street Greenway is the priority, right? In terms of where you need help. So we should probably, come up with some things that need to be done, right? And then figure out, and this is something we can work on with conservation and say, okay, this is when we'd like to do it. And then, let's collectively work together and use all of the tools at our disposal to get the info out. I think that having some sort of sign up is good.
Something on the town website.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I do think people would be, I think, there's a lot of people that would be willing to help for that, right? To put their time in and do it. They just don't know that it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So,
I almost wonder too, if it's, instead of the big scale, every time it's needed, you do a big scale thing like,
maybe once or
adopt a trail.
Yep.
Adopt a trail for the year. And the Benneker family has decided to adopt this specific area for the year. It is my family's responsibility, as I'm the one who adopted it, to do all of these things, get my own volunteers, however I do that, right? My own groups of people to help, posting it where I, think is appropriate, whatever. But it's, and I say a year just as an arbitrary number, right? But just this number of, okay, so that for the year, we now at least know this is taken care of by this family, sort of thing.
Well, it's a great way to do it too, because ultimately, if you take that on, you're gonna want help, and
Exactly.
you're gonna solicit that help, and peer pressure is a great motivator at times, right?
Exactly.
So
So I don't know that necessarily, like, every single space could do it that way, but I definitely think that there's a way to make it, once a year sort of push, right? And everyone, whatever we do, right? Everyone come, ice cream social, yay, and everyone adopt a trail or something like that,
Yeah,
that
we'll-
maybe recreation puts on or whatever, and then it's, like I said, like a yearly sign-up sort of thing, and then it's kind of that person's responsibility that we could all still manage, right? We still have a
Right.
list of who's taking care of it, but that person then is kind of doing this legwork that we're talking about, as opposed to us being like, okay, well, we have this trail that needs done, and we have this space that needs done, oh, and we have this space, and like, how do we continue to access all, all the volunteers instead of making it those smaller pockets of people who, as you said, you're more invested when it's like, I'm not doing it myself, so I better find a group of people to do it,
I
Yeah,
think,
that was the idea with the stewardship thing, and this came from back at the Groveland Open Space and Trails Committee. We, at times, had stewards, and, the idea was to have stewards for every, and they didn't have to always be the same people. And so we've tried to continue that with, we're in the process of kind of developing trail procedures for how we want the trails to be maintained. And then, once we've got that in place, then, like I say,
Yeah,
looking for
that's-
volunteers and say, well, all right, so you're gonna be the steward for this year or whatever,
I think there's good traction with Rebecca's like monthly message. I think a lot of people are seeing that. So if you want to reach, maybe if you want to reach out to her and say, hey, volunteer opportunity, can you get it in your, your monthly thing? Or like when Groveland Day rolls around, having big signage for the things that,
Yeah,
we do. 'Cause
something-
whenever people get together, those are the kind of opportunities to plug people for volunteerism.
And that's something I was actually, it's not on today's agenda, so I won't go too deep into it, but I was thinking recreation should have some sort of tent or something at Groveland Day, just for stuff exactly like this, so
Right.
And
that's,
it's also a great opportunity to connect with Girl Scouts or
Boy
the
Scouts,
Scouts
yeah.
or the high schools where, the kids need.
Somebody was
community
just
ser-
doing an Eagle project. I
Yep,
heard
community
something
service.
about.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
a great, start your year off and you'll get all your hours that you'll need or, whatever it is. And, yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it, I think, than the quote-unquote traditional, handout or post on a website that we've already established. Unfortunately, people don't look at.
so what does that look like you said that the Conservation Commission's working on putting together some procedures and things like that. So are you thinking this is something that's gonna, that you'll be looking to kind of revisit next spring, or are you thinking like, hey, we need to do something in the fall? Like, what's kind of your timeline for some of the trail cleanup stuff?
Well, it really probably isn't limited to a time frame, but, here it is June, and kind of we're in the midst of.
Right.
So I would love that if we had procedures and at least 4 stewardship groups or whatever they were developed by next spring.
Yep.
So that we could plan on 2025 and having our trails be in great shape by the end of the, year 2025.
Yeah, and
Right
I think
now,
it's,
we got 2, but, even them, they don't have all the procedures in place.
well, that's why I think like it's important, I think that needs to come first, just because we don't want, we want to be able to provide some guidance that, hey, if you're going to do this, and if you're going to go and work on a trail, you're going to stay
Yeah.
within, let's set some guardrails so we don't have crazy things happening with good intention, but just because, people aren't sure, hey, what should I do? So I think that's something we can work on, let's get the
Yes.
word out and.
Sure.
The other area, there's some other things I think related to trails that you can help out is, promoting the trails, right? Publicizing them. Think about trail walks, these were all things that the previous committee thought about, did some of them. Have a trail day where we have a trail walk at all of the 4 major properties and down at the Pines too. And, have someone there and people come and you take them on a walk to show them the place and, trail cleanup days, of course. And then, the stewards. Some other specific things are mapping project. We have brochures for most of those, but some of them are outdated, they're not very good, and the signage needs to be improved, the trail maps need to be improved, so we need somebody to help out with kind of publishing and putting together some good maps, taking what we've got and improving them. Yeah, let's see, what else did I say? We've got a new trail that we got CPA money for, like I want to say about 5 years ago, that 4 or 5 years ago, that we haven't been able to do anything about. And so there's another project. It's a connection that goes from Main Street near where the Pentucket Middle School is, all the way up to, through Nichols Village and through Town Forest onto state property. Great trail called the Crosstown Trail, but, so if there was somebody who was like really experienced in what had to be done to actually develop a trail, that could be done. So, there's a lot of jobs, and I think that if between your group and the commission, if we coordinate and kind of work together on this stuff, what I would like to do is have one of the commissioners kind of be interface with your committee, so you've got somebody that can come to your meetings when you're going to talk about trails.
Sure.
Or whatever, and then he or she can keep the rest of the commissioners informed about what's going on, what's being done.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think keeping that flow of information, and, obviously, again, we haven't focused so much on the open space part, but that's something that I know we're looking to change. So I think, it may not be on every meeting agenda, but I see it
Yeah.
being on fairly frequently. So I think having somebody that could, come to the meeting, right, that's great, or at least provide an update on, needs and things that need to be done, or just things that are going on, like as you're working through kind of some of those procedures, sharing that with us. And then that'll let us start to put together, a plan, right? That we can, and I think our role in that, in conjunction with conservation, is kind of working on setting up those trail the cleanup days. I think the trail walks is a great idea, and that's probably something that we could help facilitate. And then, again, I think the biggest thing is getting the word out about the stewards and things that need to be
Yeah.
done, so.
Right, so once you have like unified procedures about how do we maintain a trail, how do we make a trail, what do we need to do, what are we going to do for signage, what, needs to be done to maintain it, all that sort of stuff, then we can get the word out and get people, we can get the labor to do it.
Yeah,
And then, we can have really nice
The
trails.
easiest maintenance for a trail is to get it used. To have people walk it,
Good
that's
point.
it.
And that comes into some of the mapping too, right? I know, I know, I've directed some people to you, Mike, I think, because people have asked like, oh, where are the trails? And it's like, oh,
right.
So I think having that information readily available, whether, I know I think there's some stuff, some booklets or whatever, but, whether the trail maps are online, I know,
Yeah.
like, are any of the trails, do you know if any of the trails are published in like All Trails? There's an app, like a hiking
Yeah,
app.
there's some of it, but, again, it's not
Needs to be
very well.
updated and stuff, I
It
think.
hasn't been done that great.
Yep.
It needs to be improved. Just like the
That will help.
brochure maps and stuff, they need to be improved. They're old, some of them are out of date.
Yeah, that would, but your point is very valid, Jason, like, using them is how you maintain them, right? But I think the reason why they don't get used is kind of twofold. One, people don't necessarily know where they are, and if the maps are not accurate and the information isn't, needs to be updated, then, that, and I think, a lot of people that I know that are, avid hikers or out, doing a lot of that stuff, they use All Trails and some of the other applications that make it easy for them, right? So making sure that we have it published in there is good. And I don't know what that process would look like or entail, but it's something, I'm a tech guy, so I'm sure we can figure it out.
The, another set of trails that I would say maybe talk to the water department is the trails that are right down there along the river. They're fantastic. There's a fantastic trail system along the river. It doesn't get used that often. I don't think too many people in town even know about it because it's not very publicized. And, you know, it's another activity that you can do when you're down there at the Pines.
Yeah.
And it's under the purview of the water department, so.
And it's open to the public?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it gets a fair bit of use. There's a lot of, especially this year here, a lot of fishermen were going down there
Yeah.
and fishing. But yeah, there's a lot of people that walk their dogs through there. So it's pretty well beaten down. There's a loop. It used to go right up to the back of the cemetery.
Okay, I know where
Yes,
that one is.
yes, yes. It goes all the way down to like Crampton Ave, almost. And then there's like a stream that flows down.
There's a big concrete bench there,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Marston's Point.
granite bench.
It's called Marston's Point.
Yes.
Maybe just some increased signage might even just,
Yeah,
I
a
mean-
kiosk or
I
something.
mean, I've been to the Pines a million times with my kids. I didn't know that that was something,
Yeah.
even if it was just signage at the Pines as your
There
first
there used to be a
thing.
kiosk down there with the map thing, and same with the one off of Wood, the tree, what's that, the State Forest.
Yep.
Oh, yeah,
Town Fair.
Crane Pond.
That, because that also has a kiosk, it's still there with a map of the trail. But the water department took that off and said, no trespassing.
Yeah, I don't know. See, that's why you might want to talk to the water department
Okay.
about it. But I did talk to Rebecca about it a couple months ago, and she was like, she didn't even know it existed, you know?
Well, and that's why I like the trail day, like the trail walks too, right? Because once somebody knows that it's there, they're more apt to, one, go back, and two,
Yeah.
tell other people about it, right? And that's how you get them better used, right? So I think that's a really good.
Sure.
Cool, awesome. Any other questions on that? Anything
I
else?
think it's good. I think the main thing is come to us with what, you know, like some substance about, we need these things here.
Yep.
We need, this is the procedure for maintaining this trail. Like,
Yep.
you know, that is how we can then be, you know, an extension of your arm and, you know, reach out to folks.
Yeah, and we'll, you know, just like you'll have, you know, potentially have somebody kind of giving information to us, we'll, you know, as you say, okay, these are the things we need, we'll provide that same feedback back, saying, okay, here's what we're gonna do, you know.
Right.
We'll work with you to set up a trail day, or we're gonna get the word out about, you know, this particular thing that's going on, right? This trail that needs to be cleaned up, we'll help solicit the volunteers, and we'll figure out, you know, whether those go through you or they come
Yep.
through us, however we do that, but I think that's where we can really help with some of that stuff. In addition to, you know, when there's work to be done, actually being involved in doing the work, right? So, but I think it's really about just, and I think it's true of so many different things, it's just about getting the information out there so that people know there's an opportunity. And this is something we've talked about before, about a bunch of different stuff. So there's a brainstorming session that will happen at a upcoming meeting about exactly that. Is how do we, you know, how do we get people more engaged? How do we let people know there's opportunities to do stuff and get them more engaged so that we can make some of this stuff happen?
Yeah. So what I will do is I will talk with the commissioners over our next meeting or so and try to, I have an idea who I want to do this, and once this person agrees, then I'll let you know who he is, and, you know, then we can start collaborating
That sounds
and
great.
getting things
Absolutely.
done.
All for it.
And any time that you want to come to our meeting and talk about something, an issue or a question, that's great too.
We absolutely will. And I'm glad we were able to take care of, going back to CPC for a minute, I'm glad we've got that sorted out, so we should have representation there too now, so I think that's,
On that point, the first meetings are not until like September on that?
Yes.
Okay.
So we may, I will let you know, we may have a meeting in August. It just depends because there's some reason why. We'll probably have a short meeting in August and then you get rolling in September and then usually meet in January and February. So at the most, usually we meet about 4 times a year. So it's not a huge time commitment.
That's not a problem. I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
I understand.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was great. All right, let's continue through the agenda. Pines restroom facility. So everybody knows it's been kind of a topic of discussion that the restroom at the Pines has been closed due to some issues with vandalism and misuse. I put that, there was an update published today that we've gotten quotes or ordered new pumps to
Yeah.
get that back up and running. I don't know the exact timeline.
Second week in July.
Second week in July, right.
8th.
Just approved, they now have thermal shut-off, so they don't burn out.
Perfect.
You know, so I'm glad that those will be reopened. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about how to keep things like that from happening in the future. I think the thermal shutoffs will help. You know, obviously, there's talk about cameras outside and things like that. I did want to just put it out to the committee. You know, I think if you have ideas there, I mean, obviously, we can't.
Are there cameras? I saw a picture of something.
I don't actually know. There were, well, I thought there was at one point. I'm not sure if they're functional now. But that's something, I mean, obviously, we can't put, nor should we put cameras in the restrooms, but outside, I think is important. But I think also just, you know, continuing to remind people that it's a public resource and that, you know, it needs to be,
Well, the police station's right there also, so maybe some sort of camera that links to the police.
yeah, I think
I
that
mean,
is,
my thing though is like, if I'm in the bathroom and I'm flushing something down the toilet that's not supposed to be flushed, what's a camera outside the bathroom gonna do?
No, but what?
Unless there's
right.
some sort of alert that happens in the
Right.
toilet.
No,
that there-
100%.
You know what I'm saying? Like at that moment. I mean,
yeah, I think it
Is
really
that
just
the
is,
Is that the only like vandalism issue, or is there more than that?
it's primarily been with the bathrooms. I mean, I think at one point, like a picnic table got flipped over or
Yeah.
something like that a couple of years ago.
yeah, I don't think it's like a vandalism thing, like they're like drawing on the walls and
No,
breaking
not
stuff.
that I'm
I
aware
think
of.
it's just misusing
The toilets.
and
Got
the
it.
toilets and I don't know what's being flushed.
Right.
I'm just saying that if that's really the primary thing, a camera's not gonna.
No, I know, but sometimes there's a deterrent value
Sure.
where people will say, oh, you know, yeah, I guess they're kind of watching what's going on. Maybe I should do what I'm supposed to.
Yeah, I know that's something that, you know, again, people have been pretty frustrated that it's closed, so I'm glad
Yeah,
to
for
see
sure.
that it's gonna be reopened, and hopefully, you know, one question that I did have, and I mentioned, or I didn't get a chance to check in with, the town administrator like I normally do before our meeting. She was on vacation last week, and I was very busy this week, so we didn't get a chance to sync up. But, you know, I'm curious if those are locked at night, because they should be, I would think, right, and things like that. Just, you know, I think that there's, you know, there's reasonable times that they should be used, right?
I'm pretty sure they're locked more often than they're not.
Yeah, that, I know they're locked during the off-season. I'm not sure what the procedure is day to day, so that's
Yeah.
something I just want to check on, because I do
Yeah.
think, you know, and maybe Jason may know.
Yeah.
Jason, do the Pines restrooms get locked at night?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Steve volunteers to, well, actually, I think he gets special pay to go down in the morning and open them, and in the evening close them.
Okay.
When he does not, because he's on vacation, he'll usually seek out somebody, and I usually volunteer to open and close them.
Just a question that we were kind of discussing around
We're asking also, are there cameras outside of
Yes.
outside the restrooms? Yeah.
your mic stuff.
Oops. Yes, there's cameras outside the bathroom. There's cameras from the library looking down into the Pines. Cameras from the dock that will also look towards the bathroom, and then cameras outside the bathroom. They're looking to upgrade those cameras to make them capable of zooming in to capture license plates now.
Well, it's good to see that they'll be reopened soon, and hopefully, hopefully we can move past some of the issues that we've had with those. Any other discussion on that? Bagnell School Garden follow-up. I had hoped to have some more information tonight. I know there's a couple of outstanding questions, specifically, I think, around the shed down there, and whether it was town-owned or school-owned. I do not have an answer on that yet, so that is still kind of an outstanding question.
For which?
For the,
At the Bagnell Garden, there's a shed that's attached to the or it's in the garden area, and we had the, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but. Stephanie was here at our last meeting, and they were talking about doing some improvements on that, and just a question came up as to whether that was something that the school owned or whether something that the town owned. So I need to follow up on that.
I had some additional discussion with Rebecca, and she said basically she was checking into it. And,
Okay.
and that that I don't think we needed to do a whole bunch more as far as how that was going on. I do know that they had like an additional cleanup /
Yep.
planting like
Couple
last
weeks ago.
weekend.
Last weekend,
or the weekend before. And I think things are moving along.
Yeah, it
with
seems
that.
like it. Any other discussion on that? Project updates and discussion. Amanda, I know you had a question on the splash pad, so I don't know if you want to talk about that
Yeah,
specifically.
Sorry, just let me finish this thought for our notes.
Sure.
Yeah, I just, had some discussion about, and I just didn't have an answer because I wasn't really around when it was proposed and such, but just a conversation or information about, or if there was a conversation about like liability at the splash pad of, the town. I'm assuming if someone gets hurt or things like that, is that something that's come up? And if so, what was the discussion?
I know,
The liability for anything on public property falls under the insurance, and it also falls under assumed risk.
Okay,
So there's a certain amount of assumed risk if you utilize a playground, for example, that, if you go in there, you fall, it's going to happen and you assume that risk by doing so.
okay.
So those are the things that allow public entities to have things like dog parks, splash pads, skate parks.
The state also grants certain level of immunity against kind of certain types of lawsuits about those sorts of things.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure that to the extent that the town needs insurance, they must
yeah.
have it.
and there was a
They have
discussion
insurance.
probably, 18 months ago or so, and I think at the time we were talking specifically about the basketball courts, about, whether we should have signage that says something to the effect of, you're using this at your own risk. I know some other towns have that. I don't know that we ever moved forward with that, but as we add stuff like the splash pad, and maybe it's just a general disclaimer to the Pines as a whole, right?
When you drive in, maybe there's one
It's
sign that
As
says,
opposed to like each individual thing having a sign, but, the facilities here are used at your own,
yeah,
I don't know if the right word is risk, but
right.
you assume risk, responsibility for your actions while you're in this facility.
It's never a bad idea to give people notice.
Right.
Depends. It depends, because once you notify them, then you're assuming some of the knowledge of it. And so allowing them to assume risk on their own is something that, if it's an unsaid statement that the state agrees upon, sometimes it's better to let that lie. Those are some of the things that the town council would weigh in on.
Yeah, I think that, I was gonna say, I'm not well
No.
versed in that space to know whether it's something that we
From a
should
tactical standpoint.
Yeah.
should be doing or not, but I think it's a great, it's a, something that we should probably discuss further to figure out whether there does need to be, I know, for example, when, my kids are playing in a sports league, right, the league doesn't assume any risk if they get injured, right, so, and that's
usually
something we have to
sign a
sign
waiver
off
in the
on,
beginning.
right. So that's where I don't know if we should, it would be a great question for town council though, right? Should we have something that says, you're using these facilities at your own risk? I don't know.
It's tough because I feel like literally everything at the Pine, right? I mean, everything. At
Well,
the
and that's
Pine
why I
would be
think-
That same,
Yep.
that same idea, because I knew that there was a term for it, the assumed risk thing. I didn't want to respond and not,
Yeah, it's the
it's-
same for
yeah.
Bagnell, because Bagnell's open to public, the
Yep.
playground back there.
Yep.
yeah, so if
And I
you go to a
think
park
that
and you
does
get
have
hurt.
a
Washington
sign.
Park.
I think Bagnell does have a sign on it.
I don't
I think
know.
it's on the fence.
Could be.
Maybe.
But, so I think it's something, maybe we can ask, maybe it's something we can ask the town administrator to ask the town council about, right? Should we have some sort of disclaimer of risk? Jason, you don't know is that a question we've already asked, or is that
I
just?
believe it is. It's been asked for various
probably for
reasons, so
everything. Yeah.
she'll probably already know the answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Well, maybe that's good enough on that. Any other discussion on the splash pad?
So Jason, what's the time frame on the splash pad?
Right
roughly?
now, it went to engineering, and it came back with a flaw. something that wasn't anticipated. Normally, when I think of a splash pad, you think the water's just gonna run off and over the splash pad and just be absorbed into the ground. But unfortunately, they realize that when the kids are using it, they're also gonna be using the bathroom when they're there, and so they worry about things like eutrophication of the ground. So therefore, it needs to be hooked to sewer, which is an added expense that was never anticipated at the conception of the splash pad. So it's something that they're looking at and working with the water department and others to mitigate, and so they can continue to move forward. So it's at a bit of a standstill right now because of that.
So if we were assuming that they can surmount this hurdle, like, once they figure out the sewage issue, then, is it a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year project?
Then it becomes a situation for the contractor. I don't know how many people have lots of experience dealing with contractors here in the Northeast, but it can be very challenging if you're not on top of them every second of every minute of every day.
Is that Rebecca's job too?
Well, and that's one of the, getting back to.
One of the reasons why that she has, when she had the opportunity to redo the highway department, that she chose to go with a project manager. So, moving forward, when she fills that position, then there'll be somebody that will be dedicated to more of the projects and the management of the projects, which is going to be great, one, to get it off of Rebecca's desk, and two, to ensure that these projects get done. Like Mike alluded to, the projects in the past, a lot of them didn't get done. And a lot of them didn't get done completely because they didn't have that. They relied on the highway commissioner at the time, who was an elected official, who did a great job, but things fell off depending on the priority of what needed to be done for the roads.
Sure.
So those are things like the Pines. The Pines ran out of money and never got completed. It doesn't have the top coat on the parking lot. It never got the additional softball field that was originally supposed to go in. That's now been turned into a dog park. So there's a lot of things, and we've made great strides just in the fact that we got so many of these projects approved, and we actually have these projects being in place is a big improvement to what has been going on in the past.
Sure.
So now it's a matter of getting the proper people in place to get these projects all completed. And like I said earlier, it is a process for all the projects. Like the skate park, they decided they wanted to have ground surveys, the soil samples and compaction rates, and that took them 3 months to get.
Sure.
So, and in fact, they just got them, and now they have to get the information deciphered. And the contractor says that he's having a problem sourcing the concrete, which I don't fully understand, but I had the pleasure of talking to him because he wouldn't respond to Rebecca today about some pricing I needed for some benches for an additional grant that we're going for the dog park, for the shade structure and for some more seating. It's something that the Stanton Foundation has offered, an additional $31,000 in a grant for the dog park to be used for some of these items. So we went to him to get some pricing on some benches because they have that sourced out, and they're the rep. And he hadn't responded, and there was 2 or 3 emails to him. So I called, they put me to his voicemail. I hung up, I called back and said, the voicemail's full. And I need to talk to somebody now.
Yeah.
And so they took down my number and responded to Rebecca very quickly. So those are the things that are very time-consuming to get accomplished, because these are the type of contractors that we have to deal with, being the lowest bidder a lot of times.
Rebecca mentioned that when the sidewalk was originally done for one of the components of the dog park area or whatnot, it wasn't done right.
The trail in the back, yeah.
Does the town have any like recourse against the people that didn't do a good job?
No, because there was certain steps that should have taken place that would have cost an extreme more money that weren't necessarily in place.
Yeah, and this is why I brought up the whole sign-off thing, right? And why I think is part of especially for stuff at the Pines, but for the recreation projects in general, I think it would, or things that involve things like the Pines and Washington Park and stuff like that, where I think it would be good, maybe we're not the ultimate authority that says, yep, this is good, but at least to have taken a look at it and be able to provide feedback either to the town administrator or to the board of the select board to say, you know, we took a
We've
look at
done
this
everything,
and
we've-
we
you
think
know,
it's right, or, hey, this was, you know, not done correctly and it needs to be fixed, right? Because it is hard to go back after someone has signed off and, more importantly, after somebody has been paid to say, go fix this, right?
Well, that was just it. The whole process is, the engineer, they go out and they check it. And so they went out their level and said, sorry, it's 2.5% of a grade, and ADA compliance 2%, it fails. So now you have to change it. So without all the proper engineering drawings and,
But this is why procedurally we do these things typically beforehand, so that we know beforehand what is.
right, well, that's
what is
just it.
required.
You gotta have the money beforehand.
Right,
You can't get the money until the
until
town
the
meeting.
warrant passes, and then
Yeah.
after that.
No,
then
but I
you-
think what we can do, and I like the discussion that we had with Mike around, you know, discussing some of these projects in a little more detail and asking some questions, right? We're not, I don't think anyone here would think we're gonna get it right every single time, it's just not gonna happen, but, you know, one, we learn from past projects, two, you know, I think having more people looking at it and just thinking about, okay, do we need to factor in this, like ADA compliance, do we need to factor in, you know, sewer for the splash pad? Would have that come up in one of our meetings? Hindsight's 20/20, so it's easy to say yes, but I think there's a better chance.
It's
if
not
we're
something I would have ever come up with.
discussing, You know, yeah, I know.
Sewer
but-
for a
I know,
splash
and that's
pad.
why it's good to have a lot of eyes on these
Right.
projects, you know, coming from different backgrounds, coming from different, you know, places, of
You
course.
know, yeah, exactly.
And so that poor Rebecca doesn't have to be the eyes and ears and, you know,
Right.
sense on every single thing that goes on in town solely.
Right, and I would much rather ask a whole bunch of questions, and the answer be, yep, we've got that covered, we've got that covered, we've got that covered, than not ask the questions and miss something, right?
Right.
Again, we're not gonna catch everything, but I think we can, you know, we can at least say, hey, we've done our due diligence. All right, so we talked about the splash pad, we talked about the skate park. Pickleball court, one thing on that is I did have a resident reach out to me that lives right near there and ask whether or not we had factored in soundproofing, because there's been some issues in other towns with pickleball courts near residential areas. I guess it's really loud, and at least one or two other towns have had to subsequently shut their pickleball courts down until they could address it because there were so many noise complaints. I don't recall that being part of the original proposal for the pickleball court. Jason, I don't know if you remember otherwise.
No, it hasn't been.
But that may just be, you know, when we talk about maintenance costs and things like that, that might be something that has to, at some point, be addressed.
It just depends.
Yeah, we don't know yet,
We'll-
right?
We'll find out when, how far the noise is actually gonna travel.
Sure.
Because, I mean, you have it down inside of the park. It's not level with, the street.
Right, I mean,
So there's a lot of natural, noise barrier in that in itself. So, yes, I know I've spoken with, or at least seen a couple people post on, the town crier about listening to the dogs, the kids screaming, and now the pickleball. But, yeah, it is a park. It's not gonna go anywhere. And,
And it's not gonna be completely quiet either. we
yeah, it's not
understand
gonna be
that.
quiet. However, the majority of the park is from dusk till dawn.
Yep.
So that's, another thing. You're not gonna be out there listening to pickleball at 10 o'clock at night. So that's one of the biggest advantages of, the Pines.
And generally, I don't live close enough to the Pines for this to ever matter to, to affect me, but generally, what happens in a town where, let's say there is a noise complaint? Who do they complain to? Like, they call the police and complain that they hear pickleball, like, or?
Yes, they'll call the police, they'll
Police
contact, the town office,
Okay,
mainly Rebecca.
okay,
Yeah, I know with the dog park, they contacted the police a few times.
okay.
But there's not a whole lot you can do. It's dogs barking, you have dogs barking in your neighborhood. There is no specific noise ordinance. We do have construction rules. We do have disturbing the peace, but none of that really applies to that.
Okay.
Right.
So it's the same with a rooster. The roosters are making a lot of noise, and that's sort of the small town feel that we can really keep very easily. We don't have to worry about being bullied out of that by the state.
Okay.
So I did, like I said, I did just want to mention that that was something that somebody had brought to my attention. And I do not have any updates specifically on the parking. I know things were kind of in the design and finding a contractor phase at our last meeting. I think that's still progressing.
Yeah, as soon as they're done with the final engineering, that's when we'll actually have a timeline for them to be, what we'll be looking at.
And
Do we think any of the parking changes at the Pines will be done before Groveland Day?
No.
Like the connection between,
I can't imagine, right? If we're talking about,
know.
there's still,
Yeah,
we're
that's
still in
like-
the design phase and whatnot, then you have to
10
find
weeks away?
contractors.
No, because you're only looking at three months.
yeah, I don't know, I just something that popped in my head. Or.
In fact, Groveland Day might hold off anything that they do down there.
Oh, that's where I was going, was like.
Because
you know,
Groveland Day, you also have, right after that,
Pumpkin.
Pumpkins Fest.
well, Pumpkin Fest is typically up here, so that's not as big of a deal, but,
Some discussion that might
There's some
change.
discussion, yeah, to move it to the Pines.
the other thing that goes
Pine
down.
Speedway reunion?
Yes, the Pine Speedway reunion.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I was kind of thinking was like, we don't want construction to be going on in the
No.
middle of Groveland Day or any of those events for that matter. So it's going to be an interesting thread the needle type of thing to get that completed.
Unless it isn't, because it's, like we're in the design phase and
But
we're
it
we're
really-
talking about 2025 or 2026 issues instead
But
of.
we still have those
Yeah.
events that
Oh,
in
yeah.
2025.
Well, no,
and 2026
100%,
too, so-
100%. I think that we will need to thread the needle. It's just probably unfortunately not for
Yeah.
2024.
That'll be an interesting one. All right, items not reasonably anticipated at the time of posting. I did miss your email
Oh, that's okay.
about the camp, so we'll put that on the agenda for the next one.
Sure.
I saw your first email, but then I missed your second one.
That's fine.
I don't think now would have been a good time to bring Joe in anyway, because he's probably fairly busy with the camp, so.
Well, I did actually have, my daughter goes to the camp,
Yep.
and it just started this week. I actually spoke with Joe today.
Oh, good.
And he said he'd try to make the next meeting to kind of give us a feel good, but, the initial.
That was kind of the plan, was try to
Right.
get him in June, July or
Yeah.
August.
Because then the camp will have been going for.
Right.
But the initial reports, at least from one first grader, is good. And I believe she really likes the bouncy house. So,
Glad to hear it.
so good stuff.
All right, last thing, just our next meeting.
One more thing,
Oh,
sorry.
go, sorry.
You just mentioned the Groveland, having a table at Groveland Day.
Yes.
I just think that we should probably solidify that.
Yeah, we can
meeting as
reach out
opposed
and try to do that.
Because
you
if we
should
do it at
reach
the
out.
next one, then it's gonna be kind of late.
Yeah,
And
we can,
there's one other thing that we should consider, especially for the next meeting, is 2025 is our 175th anniversary. So something that we might want to help try to put something together for celebration.
yeah, that's a great idea.
As far as I know, Tracy Guilfoyle was, Tracy Guilford, thank you. He was the one that was originally going to put it together. Unfortunately, given some circumstances, he won't be able to.
What's the date?
There is no date, there's no plan as
Just-
of yet. And usually it can be a year-long or completely lengthy celebration the entire year. It just depends on what you want to put into it and what effort is going to be put in by people around it. I know that I had recommended that the Historical Society take and put together 175 years of history for Groveland, put it on display at Washington Hall, because that is a museum, and schedule tours, and then put together a schedule. I also recommended that Groveland Day this year, dedicate it to the 175th and maybe do some decorating around that. Those are a couple things that are going on that wouldn't take a lot of effort to celebrate those things, but we do have an opportunity to make it a much bigger thing.
We should also consider putting in a grant request to the Cultural Council to help fund some of that stuff.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's a great, I think we put that, that'll be an agenda item for the next meeting. And I will reach out to the Groveland Day Committee about what we need to do to make sure that we have a space at Groveland Day. I think it would be good to be able to talk about, some of the projects, some of the, I'd love to have, we can kind of brainstorm on what we want to do with it, but I think talking about projects, maybe soliciting some feedback, and kind of starting to set the stage for some of the things we were talking about with conservation, I think would be great. So I'll put.
I just
will-
wasn't sure with like when we needed to let them know. that we would like
I'll
to
reach
have a
out to
meeting.
them, as long as the committee's okay with it, I will reach out to the Groveland Day Committee, ask if we can have space at Groveland Day and kind of get the ball rolling on that, and come back for the next meeting to say, okay, this is what we can do. And then we can figure out logistics of kind of staffing it throughout the day and stuff like that. Is everyone all right with me
Yeah,
doing that?
And I would be happy to help with anything up to that, but I'm having a baby a week before Groveland Day, so I'm probably not going to be at Groveland Day, unfortunately. But
Absolutely.
I'll help with everything I can before.
No, that would be great. So I'll put both of those on the next agenda. I think the 175th anniversary and the Groveland Day table are both things that we need to,
Do we have anyone plugged into the economic committee?
Economic Development Committee?
Yeah.
I don't think so. It's mostly business owners. in
Because it would be good to reach out to them about this as well, as far as things that they might contribute for a, for a celebration. I-
Yeah, that's a good idea.
He's done on that?
Let's, yeah, he is.
He
Let's, again, let's,
Yeah.
we'll put it on the next agenda and we can kind of, maybe we can grab that list and I think the best thing to do there would be to come up with, something we could send to, I think Bill's the chair of that, send to Bill and say, here's the opportunity, right?
One other thing that's not on the list that I'd like to put on the list, do we do anything as far as like monetizing the sports that we have available, like at the Pines and things like, do we ever have any, host any like leagues or anything like that where people would pay to play and?
They pay
we would-
permitting fees, failed permit fees.
Right, but do we don't run anything or do we? It'd
No.
be interesting to talk about whether it makes sense to try to monetize, some of that, if it's a field that's sitting and could be used and, we could generate a little bit of revenue from it, wouldn't be a terrible thing, I think.
Yeah, we did have somebody reach out about running a basketball camp, but it never really went anywhere. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, previous rec committee did for softball and for the
Softball,
basketball.
Basketball and pickleball now.
Yes,
Like,
but it got taken pretty much away from the benefit of the town and just for their own benefit. So that was something that they reined back in and stopped. So it's a hard thing to work, but yeah, I think there's probably some opportunity there.
So it would be kind of like recreation programs almost would be what we'd want.
Well, it's similar to the summer program.
Yep.
the
So I know
summer
about a
camp.
year and a half ago, I want to say, I actually approached the recreation committee. I wasn't part of it.
That's how you came to be
That's
on
how
the
it
committee,
kind of
right?
came to be, yeah, because I wanted to start like a women's softball league, and I was wondering if I could use the Pines, and so I came and talked with the committee and just said, you know, I would do all of the background things, but I just needed the space and blah, blah, blah. At the time, Karen LaBelle was on the committee as well, and so she was able to kind of give feedback about the season that it's used for. Pentucket uses it, and then our softball league for like the younger kids when they use it, things like that. And it didn't sound like it was going to be much of an issue, but it was kind of sounding like it was more of a like, sounds like it could be a good idea, but not sure how it could be.
Nobody
And I
really
even said
jumped on
I
it.
wasn't expecting it for free. Like that was why I was there, so I could figure out what would the charge be, so that when I got some teams together, I could tell them, you know, this is how much your fee is going to be, so that we can pay, you know, to have the lights on for an hour on a Sunday night or whatever it
for
is.
sure.
And, you know, the committee at the time was definitely open to it, so I think that there's definitely people who would utilize something like that, but without it being, the reason it actually didn't come to fruition, to be honest, was just, it was a lot of work for me to
Oh,
try and.
It is a
And I was like,
tremendous
no,
amount
no,
of
no,
work.
I just wanted a group of, you know, moms to play softball for a little while. I was like, I can't
I
do all
mean-
this extra stuff right now.
I mean, I would be interested to see, I've had a little bit of experience in running, you know,
Yeah.
co-ed sports leagues, and I think you could definitely, if there, depending on when it's currently being used and when it's fallow, like, if it's not being used at a particular time, we have the ability to use it. Like, if we can generate a little revenue for the town.
Sure.
And do something that's, you know, fun for some folks, you know,
Sure.
Groveland or otherwise, you know, like, I think it'd be something worth exploring at least, especially now that we're gonna have a pickleball courts as well.
Well, and I think as, you know, as, like, the Pines is a great example, but there's so much there's so many ways that we can be using that space, and, it is used by a lot of the, school leagues and some of the
Sure.
other things, town leagues and stuff like that, but I think the point is, if it's idle, getting people down there, getting them to use it is great, right? And especially if we can, there are fees associated with it and things like that, that we
Yeah.
can, help with the upkeep, help with the maintenance.
Help with some
defer
other
of those
projects
costs.
potentially, who knows?
I think it's a great idea. So I'll put that on the agenda. We've already got a full agenda for the next
I was
meeting.
gonna say, a lot for the next one.
Speaking of which, when should that
So
be?
how does June 24th sound?
July.
July 24th, sorry. That would be the third Wednesday, which we seem to go back and forth between the third and fourth Wednesday. We could technically do either, I think, but I don't know if people have a preference on July 24th or July,
The 24th works better for me, but I could make either work.
24th works pretty well.
What's
for
the
me.
other option?
The other one would be the 31st.
Could we do the 31st? I may have a conflict on the 24th.
I'm okay with either. Are you able to?
Yeah, I'll make it work. Mhm.
So we'll do July 31st. Same time, 7:30. And I will, in the meantime, I've got some follow-up items, so I'll get some info out before then. And with that, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I will move to adjourn.
That's 9:10. Have a second?
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.